Welcome to the 20th episode of the Tertius Times podcast. Today is Friday, September 17th, 2021. I'm your host, Brian Wright, and I want to focus our attention on three articles on religious persecution or human rights abuses. As I announced earlier, there will be no interview segments for this week, but I have two interesting interviews scheduled soon, and those will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, God willing, so stay tuned. Today, we will look at three articles related to Christianity in China and human rights in India. Links to the stories are in the description. As I also announced previously, there is an upcoming USURF event you are invited to join entitled Strategies for Religious Freedom in Fragile States, and will take place next Wednesday, September 22nd at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Registration is open now and is free. Details will be provided at the end of the podcast. The link to register is also in the description. As stated in this article, China's CCP forces Christians to pray for dead communist soldiers or be persecuted. From Christianity Daily, September 8th, 2021, quote, the government-controlled Protestant Three-Self Church, unquote, is under directive, quote, to pray for the fallen soldiers of the Communist Red Army, unquote, as part of, quote, the 76th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War, unquote. Churches were required to report their communication materials to government officials before September 10th, apparently to ensure the churches remain in lockstep with the directive. Although both Imperial Chinese and Communist forces fought together to drive out the Japanese, the CCP wanted the majority of focus on those who fought under the Communist flag. Despite intensification of persecution, such as confiscating religious materials, because the CCP views Christianity as a threat to the communist regime, Christianity continues to grow in China. There are now more Christians in China than there are Communist Party members, according to the article. Pray for those believers in China who are part of the quote-unquote Three-Self Church, that they may see through whatever governmental controls are put upon them and see Christ as he truly is and experience his all-encompassing love and forgiveness. Pray for their boldness in being witnesses for Christ, and pray also for their protection. According to another article concerning China, Shouter Christians in Beijing sentenced to 3 years in jail from bitter winter, September 8, 2021, quote, on April 15th, 2021, two members of the Christian network of the Shouters were sentenced to jail terms of 3 years by the Beijing Fangshan District People's Court, unquote, as a result of their practice to loudly shout the Lord Jesus Christ. They have been given the name Shouters and have been considered outside the recognized religious mainstream in China since 1983, but have also become, quote, a substantial presence, unquote, in the capital of Beijing. Bitter Winter has published photocopies of the judgment, but note that since the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, there was a, quote, great purge, unquote, of online documentations, which could apparently have been used by critics to show, quote, human rights and religious liberty are not respected in China, unquote. Pray for those who are part of the so-called Shouters in China, that they may embrace the Christ of the Gospels, shine forth his love, and be a powerful force upon their society. Pray for the leaders of China that they would cease looking for control out of their political fear of usurpation, and that they would also welcome the message of the true Christ for liberation of their people and freedom of their souls. From Friday, September 10th through Sunday, September 12th, an international conference on Hindutva was held via Zoom. According to this final article, the Dismantling Global Hindutva, Multidisciplinary Perspectives Conference shed light on the fight against Hindutva ideology. It's from Indica, September 16th, 2021. The conference's primary purpose was to discuss, quote, the dangers posed by the ideology of Hindutva, or Hindu nationalism, by many academics and activists around the world, unquote, and included, quote, 44 speakers from prominent universities, unquote, such as Princeton and Stanford. Before the conference even began, however, Hindutva activists trolled, intimidated, and threatened violence against many of the speakers and their families, and called the effort, quote unquote, Hindu-phobic. However, in spite of those efforts against the conference, quote, 1,100 academics and scholars signed a statement of solidarity with the conference, and many of the panelists voiced strong concern, quote, about the ways in which Hindutva threatens the core of Indian democracy and pluralism, unquote, and, quote, spoke of the need to dismantle the anti-democratic and repressive forces that Hindutva has unleashed, unquote. One of the speakers, Sunita Vishwanath of Hindus for Hindu Rights, provided a moving testimony of her activism, noting that as a practicing Hindu, she had been deeply disturbed by the hate that Hindutva represents, unquote. As we have seen in some previous episodes, Hindutva is especially dangerous to those Indians who are not Hindu or aligned with religious movements accepted by Hindutva organizations. And many of those radical Hindu nationalists attempt to undermine the work of the church through persecution and intimidation. They also use similar tactics against Muslims, but since Christians tend to be among the poor Indians and hence lack some of the protections provided by political influence, they tend to receive the brunt of Hindutva oppression. Pray for India, that all who live there and all who have resettled elsewhere, that the temptation to cling to ideologies of exclusion that Hindutva inspires would be released from their hearts and minds, and they would realize the value of true community where freedom of conscience and real toleration reigns wherever they may live and work. For more information, go to the conference's official website, which is linked in the description. As I have been announcing all week, this is a reminder that if you are interested and can make it, this hearing on religious freedom is scheduled for next Wednesday, and you can join the free online event by registering through the link in the description. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you found the information presented here useful and that it encouraged you to pray for these areas of concern and perhaps even inspired you to take positive steps of involvement to alleviate the suffering of so many around the globe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.